Well, hey there, guys. Greetings and salutations and welcome back to the channel here on the John Campea Show YouTube channel. I'm here to talk about Open Mic, the show where the mic is open. The floor is yours. What do you guys want to talk about? That is what we are here to discuss. And we are so glad that you're here joining me here today for Open Mic. This is going to be the first Open Mic. Well, a couple of firsts, really. This is the first open mic that we've had in a couple of weeks. I mean, since early CinemaCon, we haven't had a regular open mic since CinemaCon, and because CinemaCon was coming on and that was really busy, and then it was all about getting ready to move into the new old studio. We're back here in the new old studio, back at the studio in my garage, which I'm very, very happy about. And so we haven't done an open mic for a little bit. So this is our first one. And this is the first open mic being done from the new space. First one. By the way, hello to John Young, Raph, Jonathan, Brian, King Daddy, Luke1234, Raymond, and everybody else who's already in here watching the show with us. So let me go over this one more time, because I've gone over this like 5 or 6 times, but just for people late getting catching up. You've noticed that we've changed studios, and people have been still asking, oh, why did you change studios? Even though we've explained it 5 or 6 times, but for those of you who missed it. So the basic reason we changed, and thank you, Slarf. Slarf is saying they like the look of the new studio. Yeah, I think this new studio looks good too. I'm really happy with it. But anyway, so what happened was, and forgive me for those who've already heard this story, but when I left Collider and I started my own thing, what I told myself, when I promised myself, was that I was not going to make AMC Movie News 2.0. I was going to make Movie Talk 2.0, right? I wanted it to be smaller. I didn't want to be working 15, 16, 17 hours a day. But what happened was, once I launched my channel, we grew faster than I thought. Like, I was going to be super happy if we could get to the point where we were getting like 500,000. If we got to a point where we got 500,000 views a month, I was going to be super happy. Like that was going to be great. If we could get like 500,000 views a month, I was going to be super happy. That was the goal, blah, 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 blah. But then, we got 500,000, and then we got 1 million, then we got 1.5 million, and then we got 2 million a month. And so I started falling back into my own mindset of like, well, you got to grow, you got to expand. And all of a sudden, we were doing a bunch of different shows. And so I was hiring more people. And so we needed more space. So I got the studio that we had been in the last 2 years. That's like 2,000 square feet, like 2,000 square feet. And, it was really big, because we started doing not only the John Campea Show, but we were doing 4 or 5 other shows a week too. Like, we were doing Heroes and Best Movie, Worst Movie, and Opening This Week, and Movie Club, and we were doing the Game and Chats, and we had 1 or 2 other things that we were doing as well, right? So, and all of a sudden, I had 7, 8, and 9 people on payroll, and we needed all this space. And then about a year ago, I realized I was working 15, 16, 17 hours a day again. And I realized I'm doing everything I swore to myself I wouldn't do. I am remaking AMC Movie Talk 2.0, and I promised myself that's the one thing I wouldn't do. Not to mention, I started realizing that with all these other shows we were doing, Movie Club, Best Movie, Worst Movie, Heroes, things like that it was literally costing us more money to make those shows than we were making from them. So not only were we working, and was I working way more and did all this stuff, but we were making shows that weren't even paying for themselves. So I made the decision about a year ago, I think it was about a year ago, that I was gonna take things back to the way they should be. We're just gonna do the John Campea Show. We're getting rid of the secondary shows. That was around about the time that, we lost some staff people. Rob left for a while because, he wasn't in a position at that time that working just part-time instead of full-time was really beneficial for him. But we always said Rob would be back. And of course he's back. And all that kind of stuff. So once that happened, once we reduced the number of staff we had, reduced the number of shows we had, all that kind of stuff, it became apparent that we don't need a 2,000 square foot studio anymore. So a number of months ago, we made the decision that once the 2-year lease was up, we were going to move out of that studio. Not because the studio wasn't great. The studio was fantastic. I loved it. But we were literally not even going into half the rooms that were in the studio anymore because we had no need for them. Like we literally had 3/4 more space than we needed. We were literally had this 2,000 square foot studio that, even though it was a very good price, we were spending $5,000 a month on. When you count the rent for the studio plus the internet costs, electricity, water service, all that other kind of stuff, we ended up spending about $5,000 a month. And it's like, you know what? We've got all the space we don't need. We're spending this money we don't need to spend. I'm just going to go back home. I'm just going to go back to the garage studio. And here we are, moved back into the garage studio. And I'm very, very excited about it. I'm very happy to be back in the garage studio. Everything is now back to the way it should be. And it's good to be back. All right. So listen, we're here to talk about the things you guys want to talk about with Open Mic. But before we do, I want to piggyback on a conversation that we had during the John Campea Show earlier today. Of course, we talked a lot about the Deadpool trailer. And Rob saying he was underwhelmed by the Deadpool trailer because he said it didn't give us enough of what the story is. I disagreed with Rob on the show. I said, I do feel like they told us what the movie was about. Now, Rob being the same guy who said he didn't even think they should put out a single trailer for Endgame, but that's besides the point. But Rob, there's certainly a lot of things in the trailer that Rob loved as well, just like I did. And, one of the questions we brought up during that has been a question that's been brought up a bunch of times in the last number of months, which is, can Deadpool get to the $1 billion mark? Can Deadpool join Deadpool 3, Deadpool and Wolverine? Can Deadpool join the $1 billion club? And we talked on the show earlier about how there's some arguments about why it won't make it and some arguments about why it will. Now, the way I see it, and I might be missing one or two, but the way I see it, the two biggest things working against Wolverine and Deadpool and Wolverine getting to the $1 billion mark is, number one, it's an R-rated film. There's only ever been one R-rated film to make $1 billion at the box office, and that was Joker a couple of years ago. So that is working against it. The second thing working against it is that we have only had 2 movies. Correct me if I'm wrong in the live chat, guys, but as far as I'm aware, unless I'm not remembering correctly, only 2 movies in the post-pandemic era have joined the $1 billion club. And that was, of course, Mario Brothers, and that was Barbie. I don't think Oppenheimer ever got to it. Even with the Japan release, I don't think Oppenheimer got to the $1 billion mark. Again, guys in the live chat, correct me if I'm wrong. Top Gun. There were a couple of other ones. Yeah, Top Gun, Avatar 2, No Way Home. Still, in the 3 some odd years, there have been fewer films getting to the $1 billion mark than what we're accustomed to, right? So that's kind of working against it a little bit. Now, as far as the R rating goes, what I said on the show today was, I don't think the R rating is going to keep that many people away. Because remember, there are going to be people, younger people, who are still going to go with their older brothers, their uncles, one of their parents will take them to go see it. So like in the United States, younger people can go to R-rated films as long as they go with somebody who's over 18, right? So I don't know that that's going to stop a lot of people. Now, there are a number of arguments, and we've talked about this on the show before, and we mentioned it today, but there are a number of arguments for why it will make $1 billion. First of all, it's been years since the last Deadpool, and people have been very, very excited about it. I said number 2, I think Ryan Reynolds is arguably today a bigger star than he was when Deadpool came out. Number 3, Deadpool is now what everybody wanted it to be in the MCU. I didn't want it in the MCU. I wanted Deadpool to be on its own thing, but whatever. Everybody else wanted Deadpool to be in the MCU, and here we are. Deadpool is in the MCU. That's something a lot of people waited for. And the fourth thing is that finally, we've been waiting for Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds to get together to do a movie together, particularly as Wolverine and Deadpool. You put all those things together with trailers that have been, in my opinion, magnificent. And I honestly just don't see how Deadpool 3 doesn't make $1 billion. Now, as far as those arguments against it getting to $1 billion, I don't think those are irrelevant. Like, I don't think Deadpool makes $1.5 billion. I don't think Deadpool 3 makes $2 billion. You know, the R rating isn't going to have a huge impact, but I think it will have an impact. Not a huge one, but a little bit of one. The fact that, you know, movie going has not returned. It keeps getting higher and higher, but movie going has not gotten back to its pre-pandemic levels yet. I think those things will have an impact, but the impact is going to be keeping it from getting to 1.5 or 2 billion. I still think it gets to $1 billion. And Sean Quinn is puts it perfectly. Like, Ryan Reynolds is a marketing genius. I mean, he and Mint Mobile sponsor the John Campea YouTube channel. Obviously, marketing geniuses. But yeah, Ryan's a marketing genius. The marketing behind Deadpool has always been top-notch and brilliant, whether it's Deadpool 1, Deadpool 2, whatever. I don't see any reason to believe they're not going to have that same kind of brilliance in their marketing of Deadpool 3. Listen, we're still 3 months away from the movie. We've already had 2 trailers, a CinemaCon presentation, new posters. They are going to market the crap out of it, and it's not going to be traditional marketing. It's going to be a lot of guerrilla warfare kind of marketing, the stuff that Deadpool really does well. And this movie's going to make $1 billion. Now, I will say, to Rob's point, Rob makes a really good point about this. There is one other thing that could work against Deadpool, against it making $1 billion. And that is if the movie is terrible. Now, there's no reason to believe the movie will be terrible, but if it is, any movie could be terrible, right? Any movie could be terrible. And if Deadpool 3 is terrible, it's still going to have a massive opening week. Like, its first weekend is going to be bonkers big. It's going to make a lot of money in its first week, but it may fall short of the $1 billion mark. It might fall short of the $800 million mark if the movie is bad and can't generate a lot of repeat viewings, like Jonathan Voico was saying earlier today on the John Campea Show. So those are the things that I see working for it and against it. But I mean, I'm just telling you what, I just can't imagine. I just can't imagine this movie not making $1 billion. Again, when you just look at the logic of it, it's now in the MCU. The anticipation's been building. Hugh Jackman and Deadpool together. Wolverine finally in the MCU. I mean, and especially coming off of Hugh Jackman's last outing of Wolverine was one of the top 3 greatest comic book movies of all time in Logan. First comic book movie in history, by the way, to be nominated for a Best Screenplay Academy Award. That's huge. So you put all that together, and I just don't see it not making that $1 billion. I just think it will, again, as long as the movie doesn't suck, right? As long as the movie doesn't suck, then I think we're going to get there. But as always, guys, to you, what do you think? Do you think it's going to make, what are some of the other arguments against it getting to $1 billion? And what are some of the other arguments that will help it get to $1 billion? I want to know what you guys think. Let me know down in the comments below. All right, guys, with all that down, it is time for us to get on to, if I can find it, I've seemed to have lost it. Where did it go? Oh my goodness, I have lost our questions that you guys have sent in. Don't worry. I will find them again. Give me a second. I was going to say it's time to get over to the questions you guys have been sending in. And then I promptly lost where I put your questions. And let's see. There we go. Okay, I got them back now. Thank goodness. Okay, let's get over to your questions. And we are going to start off your questions now that I finally got them back. We are going to start off with this as I get down to the right spot. Okay, going to start off with Duck Duck, who writes, Buenas tardes. I skipped season 1 of The Last of Us because I had played the game. It's perfect in my opinion and didn't need expanding. Wasn't impressed by the few clips I saw, so I decided not to watch. My loss, I suppose. Happy for the praise it's gotten. Things are different for part 2. The game was a step down for me. Ooh, I disagree. I thought the story of The Last of Us part 2 was even better than the story in The Last of Us part 1, but that's just me. And I saw a lot of room for improvement, something the show can do, expand. This is the first time I've seen something like this. Perks of an adaptation. Here's the thing. Last of Us Part 1, the television series or a movie compared to a video game, a story is a story, but how it's presented completely makes for a different experience, right? Like, I can read Lord of the Rings and it's great, right? I love it. And the story is a story. I can read Lord of the Rings and have an experience with it while I'm reading the story. But then when you shift mediums and Peter Jackson makes a movie out of it, per se, right? He makes a movie out of it. That is, while the story may still be the story, it's a completely different experience. Now, by the way, Last of Us Season 1 takes a lot of liberties with the game. And in almost every way, those liberties that they take improves the story for the medium that it's on, right? For a television series medium, it improves the story. It makes it better for that medium. And it's just a completely different experience. I would highly suggest that you check out Last of Us. I think it is one of the 3 great shows of the past 5 years. I might put a 4th in there with Andor, but is House of the Dragon, Shogun, which I got to watch the finale later, Shogun, and Last of Us. And I may put Andor in there as well, but I'll just say the 3 for now. Shogun, Last of Us, House of the Dragon. I'm telling you, you really do need to watch it. It's absolutely breathtaking. It's absolutely phenomenal. And you should definitely check it out. All right. Thanks for that, Duck Duck. Next up, we've got Tom. Oh, no, that's not Tom. It's a T Cakes who writes, Tom Holland is to be Romeo and Juliet, will be played by a black actress. Racist abuse she is getting is disgusting. This is not new. Papa Isidou was Hamlet and Romeo. Thick USA racists are boycotting a movie that's actually a sold out play in the West End of the UK. Well, I mean, this is an old story we go back to a lot. What I do, look, the term they didn't need to change it is just camouflage for people's racism, right? Because here's the thing. Unless the nature of a story makes the ethnicity of the character of vital importance, right? Say T'Challa, the Black Panther. Say Bruce Wayne. Like I usually contend that Bruce Wayne being Caucasian is actually in the DNA of the character is vital to who and what the character is, because Bruce Wayne growing up in a life of white privilege, as tortured as it was, I think that plays a very important part to understanding who and what Bruce Wayne is. But I find that less than 1% of fictional characters out there, their ethnic appearance plays no part in the core DNA of who and what that character is. Like James Bond can be black because James Bond being white has absolutely zero to do with the character. I think Perry White can be white or black because it doesn't really matter. The nature of who the character is not dependent on their ethnicity. Whatever. And here's the part that always gets me. Let's say Juliet in one movie. Well, let me take Juliet out of it. This is the part that nobody ever has a good answer for me. When they say, well, they shouldn't make that character whatever it is. I say, okay. Here's the thing. Why not? Well, because it changes it, because that character in the original movie was white. Oh, okay. Okay, let's follow that train of logic. So you are mad, not because you're a racist piece of shit. Heaven forbid, not because of that. You're mad because there is a physical characteristic that isn't the same, an unimportant physical characteristic, by the way, that isn't the same in this new take on it as it was in the old take. That's right, they shouldn't change it. Okay. So if the actress in the original was 5'4", but the actress in the new one is 5'6", does that bother you? Because that's a physical change. That is a significant physical change. A 2-inch height difference is a big physical change. Well, no, that doesn't matter. Okay. Well, the actress in the original had beautiful brown eyes. This actress has blue eyes. There's a physical change in difference. Oh, no, that's fine. Okay, the actress in that original had hair down to here. The actress in the new one has hair down to here. Oh, no, that's fine. Okay, the actress in the original has a nose that looks like, I don't know, Greta Garbo's nose, and the actress in the new one has got more of a Julia Roberts nose. No, that's fine. Oh, but when you get to the point, okay, the actress in the original had this pigmentation of skin color, and the actress in this version has a different pigmentation in skin color. Oh, the world is ending. Oh my, and they freak out and they whine and they cry. It's like, why are they changing it? Well, they always change. It's unless you get a clone of the original actor or actress, there are always physical changes. Whether it's height, weight, facial features, skin tone, hairstyle, number of teeth. I don't know, maybe they're missing a couple of teeth. There's always some physical changes, but you acknowledge those aren't important. But oh my God, if you take a character who had this pigmentation of skin color and changes it to that pigmentation of skin color, that changes things. Just stop just own it. Just say, you know what? I'm a racist piece of shit. I don't like people who look different than me. So, I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And Stargirl raises a great point. Listen, if you really want, and listen, this isn't just a joke. This isn't just funny. This is 100% true. If you really want Juliet to be portrayed as close to the original portrayal as Juliet, you got to get a man to play her. Is that what you want? You have to get a man to play them, because in the Globe Theater, where Shakespeare was putting on his plays, the female roles were played by men. So if you're all just about artistic purity, which is a lie, but if you're really just all about artistic purity, okay, you want Juliet to be portrayed as close to the way they were originally portrayed? Okay, you got to have a guy in a wig. You got to have a guy in a wig. Because that's how you make it as close to the original as possible, is by having a guy in the wig. Anyway, you know, it's funny, when Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes made their version of Romeo and Juliet, I didn't love it, by the way. Just I didn't hate it. I didn't love it, but it was very interesting. The fact that swords were guns that were just renamed sword, like the brand of gun was called sword. When they said, draw your swords, they would pull their guns, right? it was in a modern day era, which Romeo and Juliet was never in, using guns and you know, all the and settings and background. There was less crying about that than having an actress who's got a different pigmentation of her skin playing the role. It's just, it's the world we live in now. Just is what it is. And by the way, let me be very, very clear about something. Because I think some people cross and blur some lines here. I don't think just not liking a particular actor being cast in a particular role because you don't think they're a good fit for their acting ability or their personality and happens to be a black actor, that has nothing to do with anything. That's just, hey, I just think this actor, regardless of their skin color, I don't think they're a good fit. I just think the way they portray themselves, the type of charisma they have, whatever else, I just don't think that's a good fit for that role. There's nothing wrong with that. There are people who feel that way, and they shouldn't be lumped in with the racist pieces of garbage who just don't want them because they're black. Right? And they shouldn't all be lumped in together. There are perfectly legitimate reasons to not like a particular direction a story is going, or to not like a particular actor in a particular role, whether they're white or black. And those people who just have some legitimate artistic stuff should not be lumped in with the people who are just using, you know, this as a veil for their own inherent racism. They should not be lumped in together because they are two totally separate groups. Just because somebody doesn't like it doesn't mean they're one of those people. They could be a completely other different group. Anyway, that's just my thought on that. Okay, next up. Let's see. Jay Newby writes, Quiet on the Set was probably one of the most unsettling and moving documentaries I've ever seen. Which documentary have you seen that moved you so much it changed your entire outlook on the topic? Thank you for your time and for inspiring me. You're the best. I think there's a couple. Pardon me. One of them was Bowling for Columbine. Now, I'm not a huge Michael Moore fan. I think if you've watched me for any period of time, you know this. I don't hate Michael Moore. Don't get me wrong, not at all. I'm just not a big Michael Moore fan. But Bowling for Columbine was very, very eye-opening to me. And I thought that was pretty cool. But that's not the one that moved me the most. The one that moved me the most was easily Won't You Be My Neighbor? Or It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. I always get mixed up. Tom Hanks did a Mr. Rogers movie, and there was a Mr. Rogers documentary. One of them was called Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. One of them was called Won't You Be My Neighbor? And I often forget which one was called which. At any rate, the documentary about Mr. Rogers, you guys have heard me talk about it many times, because it was a documentary that I believe doesn't just inspire, but convicts you to want to try to be a better human being. Like, I don't think you can walk away from that Mr. Rogers documentary and not feel a burning desire in yourself to want to become a better human being. And I love documentaries that can move you like that. But again, I've never seen one that has moved me to that level like that Mr. Rogers one did. It was really, really influential. All right. Thanks a lot for that, Jay. Next up, Cosmin writes, Hello from Romania. Hello from Romania. Do you think Apple TV Plus will expand their services in the near future? They aren't available in a total of 9 countries in Eastern Europe, plus a lot of African countries. They release their services only in a select number of countries. Yes, but that's par for the course for most streaming services, right? Like Netflix is in practically the whole world now, but they did not start out that way. Right? It takes time. It builds up. It ramps up. Disney Plus did not open in every market. It takes time. They acquire new territories. They build up. They build their infrastructure, and then they're able to build up that way. HBO Max, same thing, was not available in all countries. It starts off at a certain number and it builds as it develops its infrastructure and all that kind of stuff. Yes, I think Apple TV Plus will absolutely expand and grow, but Cosmin, you got to keep in mind that it's still very early in its infancy. Right? It's very early in its infancy. And so it's got to give it some time, but I think it will expand, if not to all countries, then certainly most. So it'll get there. All right, good question, man. Next up, Garden Variety Vagabond writes, Screen Rant reported that the original Vanessa from Daredevil was in costume on set. That is a great reversion to the Netflix cast. Reversion? All the original pieces are falling back into place. Yeah, so listen, again, this is yet another huge sign. Well, it's not, you don't need to look for signs anymore. They explicitly came out and said it. Daredevil Born Again on Disney Plus was never going to be the same Daredevil from the Netflix series. And I remember when I tried to tell people that, because Charlie Cox pretty much made it clear, like over a couple of years, he made a number of big comments, and that clearly indicated that the Daredevil we were getting in the Disney Plus world was not the same Daredevil. It was very much like him, but it wasn't actually him. It was not the same Daredevil from the Netflix series. And whenever I bring that up, people go, no, John, you're wrong. It's the Daredevil from the Netflix series, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, but Charlie Cox is saying this. He's saying this isn't Daredevil season 4. He's saying this is a new thing. They're saying it's all different. And then one of the big indicators as well was when they recast, well, we found out that Foggy and Karen weren't going to be in it, and that the character Vanessa, Wilson's Squeeze, they recast it and got a different actress from it. I mean, they made it very clear it was not the same Daredevil from the Netflix series. But then months ago, they completely changed directions. They were almost done shooting Daredevil Born Again, and Kevin Feige, now having his power back, made the decision to scrap the whole thing and decided it was going to be the same Daredevil from the Netflix series. And they went out and got Foggy and Karen from the Daredevil series to bring them in. And now it looks like, to really put an explanation point on it, it seems like they've gone and gotten, it seems, I don't know for sure, but it seems from the reporting that we're seeing that they've gone and gotten the original actress who played Vanessa to come in. So to everybody who was insisting before that it was the same Daredevil as Netflix, no, he wasn't. He wasn't. But now he is. And I think that's made a lot of people very happy. I was perfectly fine with it being a new iteration of Daredevil. I was okay with that, but I loved the Netflix Daredevil series. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see the way they do this. All right. Thanks for that, Garden. Next up, The Dumb of All Fears writes, what do you think has a greater sway on the opinion of something, movie, TV show, etc., to the average person? The quality of the product or the experience they have when first seen in full? I don't know that you can separate the two. I think the quality of the product is directly connected to the experience you have when you first watch it. You know, I remember Rob and I had this discussion, like a really good discussion about this once. Because I was asking the question, and I still don't have the answer. I'm just asking the question. You know, sometimes we talk about what we think is the best movie versus what is our favorite movie, right? You know, people make a distinction. This is my favorite. I don't think it's the best, but it's my favorite. Or, I don't think this movie was very good, but I totally loved it. Here's the thing. Movies are experiential events, right? The job of a movie or a TV show, a documentary, whatever, is to deliver and give you an experience. Whether the experience is laughter, crying, pondering, fear, screaming, gasping, whatever. So, I wonder if a movie creates such a great experience for you that you had a great time, then should we not say for you that it was a great movie? It may not have been a great movie for the person next to you, but for you, should we have that distinction? Like, I'm trying to think of a recent movie I just saw. Let's go with Monkey Man, right? I didn't think Monkey Man was awesome, but I thought it was really good because I came out of it pretty jazzed. I had a good time with it. Again, not the best time, not as good of a time as I thought I was going to have, but I had a really good time with it, right? And so we can then get into discussions about, other aspects of filmmaking, but at the end of the day, for me, I had a good time. And if that movie delivered that experience, that good time experience for me, then for me, it was a good movie. So I just wonder about that distinction. Anyway, going back to your question, Dumb of All Fears, what has the bigger impact, the quality of it or the experience it gives it? I think the two are connected. Because quality is a subjective term as well, right? Like, did that soup taste good? Well, one guy might thought it tastes good and another guy maybe thought it was too salty. I mean, neither is right or wrong. It's just that their definition of quality will be quantitatively subjective. So I don't know if we can make a distinction between the two. It's a really, really good question, but it's one I wonder about. Anyway, thanks for writing that in, Dumb of All Fears. Next up, Garden Variety Vagabond writes, just learned a cool piece of trivia about our shared favorite movie. After Arnold Schwarzenegger turned down the role of the Kurgan, Clancy Brown got the opportunity based on a recommendation from Sting. The director was from music videos and talked to Sting at a party. Sting and Clancy Brown were just in The Bride together. Sting as Dr. Frankenstein, Jessica Biel as the bride, not for the monster, but for him. Quote, you didn't create me. In fact, I did. 30 Metascore. So bad, I must see it now. So for those of you who don't know, what he's talking about our favorite movie, Arnold Schwarzenegger's True Lies is not my favorite movie, but it's my favorite action film. True Lies is my all-time #1 favorite action film. I love it so much. Anyway, but Clancy Brown is amazing because The Highlander is one of my top 10 all-time favorite movies. It's the one movie on my top 10 list that when I mention it, people go, what? Like when I mention Godfather, people go, yeah, yeah. When I mention Star Wars, people go, yeah, yeah. When I mention Lawrence of Arabia, people go, yeah, yeah. But when I get down the list and I get to The Highlander, people go, hey, wait, what? The Highlander? The one with Sean Connery? Christopher Lambert? Clancy Brown? That is in your top? Yeah, it's in my top 10 all-time favorite films. There can be only one. Anyway, we won't talk about any of the sequels. But Clancy Brown, he very sneakily is one of the actors in 2 of my top 10 all-time favorite films. The Highlander and Shawshank Redemption, one of the greatest movies ever made in the history of Hollywood. And he's just awesome. I love Clancy Brown. And so I got a big kick out of it when he was in the Boys spinoff series, Gen V. When he was in Gen V, I got a really, really big thing of that. And I cannot wait. And I don't know, Sam, if you know about this. Sam's saying we need a Highlander reboot. I don't know if you know, but we are getting one. Being directed by one of the John Wick directors and starring my boy, Henry Cavill, who you can't see him in shot, but Henry is standing right over there, looking down, guarding the studio. And yeah, but Clancy Brown, man, what an amazing, amazing performer. I love him. All right, next up. JM None Other writes, I recently had a friend that wrote a book and she came to me and showed me what looked like an email from a content manager from TriStar Pictures for film rights to her book. What are the signs of the email being real or fake? Thank my friend, bring on the filthy. It is most likely fake. It is most likely fake. Actually, does TriStar Pictures even still exist? I know that's a really dumb question to ask. I can't even... Does TriStar still exist? I can't even remember if TriStar... Guys in the live chat, help me out. Actually, yes, somebody else just said the same thing. Does TriStar... I'm not even sure TriStar Pictures still exists. But at any rate, they may very well. It is unlikely that it's legit and real. Because normally what happens is 95% of the time, the way studios pick up the rights to something is through a literary agent. Studios mostly work with literary agents. Okay. So when often I have people write to me and say, John, I wrote a script. Can you tell me who I mail it to at the studios to see if they'll get it? And I have to break the news to them that says, when I tell them that, the problem is studios don't accept unsolicited submissions. Because if they did, if they accepted script submissions, then 10 years from now, if they happen to make another movie that somehow has some similarity to a script you sent them 10 years ago, that you'll come out and sue them for plagiarism or something like that. So studios do not accept unsolicited submissions. You can't write a script and go, where's the email address for Warner Brothers? I'm going to send them my script. They will deal with literary agents. Okay, so you got to get an agent, a literary agent. And then the literary agents are the ones that have the relationships with the studios. So listen, I'm not going to try to kill your friend's hype. I don't want to yuck on her yum. But it sounds like that it's fake. It sounds like it's fake. It's probably fake, but I'm not going to say 100% for sure it's fake because I haven't read it myself. I don't know it, but it is most likely not real. And why somebody would do something like that to her, I have no idea. Maybe they're trying to get her social security number or something. I don't know. But I hope it's real. I just don't think it actually exists. They were acquired and then phased into something else. And then I don't think TriStar Pictures is an actual production company anymore. But again, I'm not sure about that off the top of my head. All right. Next up, we've got Your Name. Right. In Fallout Episode 6, Titus hopefully learned a valuable lesson. When a woman like Lucy offers to let an appendage explode, the answer should always be yes. Oh, yeah. Yes. No, that's normal. I think that's pretty normal. I'll tell you what, I finished Fallout and I got to say, I really enjoyed it. I mentioned on the John Campea Show earlier today, like, to me, it's not on the same level as it's definitely not on the same level as Shogun or Last of Us or House of the Dragon, but it's really good. And I know a lot of people were worried because, it's an Amazon show and there were people worried because, the Lord of the Rings series did not turn out, let's put it diplomatically. The Lord of the Rings series did not turn out to be as good as a lot of people hoped, including me, that it could have been. And so people were really nervous. That's an Amazon series. I got really nervous when they said they were going to drop all the episodes at once. That was a huge mistake on their part. But I got to tell you, man, the show is really, really quite good. And that was a very funny exchange. And, it kind of explodes. No, I think that's a normal thing. I think that's a regular thing that people experience. It's okay. I thought that was really good. I've enjoyed the show a lot. And did anybody recognize that her dad, Lucy's dad, is the original Paul Atreides from the original Dune movie? Her dad was the Muad'Dib. Her dad was Paul Atreides. Anyway, loved the show. I thought it was really, Walton Goggins is absolutely amazing. And by the way, this should give a lot of people a lot of excitement about the God of War movie show that they've got cooking up. This should build a lot of confidence in people for that. So we'll see how it turns out. All right, next up. Your Name also writes, correction, the answer should always be yes. And now please. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, and please. All right. Next up, we've got Sabrosa. And Sabrosa writes, hey, John, I've been watching for 5 years. Thank you so much. I still remember my first video. Is the reconnaissance officially over? Thanks for everything you do. You all have gotten me through very, very hard times. Oh, thank you so much for that, Sabrosa. And thanks for being around for so long. Here's the thing about Matthew McConaughey. The reconnaissance is obviously over and has been over for a while. But make no mistake, Matthew McConaughey, that doesn't mean Matthew McConaughey is not still a very solid presence in the entertainment industry right now. He's still totally a great, great presence. I happen to really like Matthew McConaughey. I think he's a fabulous actor. And you know what? If it's still happening, the fact that he's going to be leading this new Yellowstone spinoff, I think is fantastic. I think he's perfect for the world of Yellowstone. So Oh yeah, I loved him in Lincoln Lawyer. Mouse. Now Lincoln Lawyer was still kind of in the midst of the reconnaissance, so I don't know if we can count that, but I think the guy's fantastic. I just love him whenever I see him in anything. So yeah, the reconnaissance may be over, but his career ain't over. He's still doing really good stuff. All right. Thanks for sharing that, Sabrosa. Next up, we got an anonymous viewer who writes, "Hey, John, what happened to, speaking of this stuff, what happened to the Rings of Power? I like season 1, but the most expensive show ever. It seems no one cares about this show anymore. Is it time for Amazon to cut their losses after season 2, or this series can still be successful?" All right. In my opinion, okay, and it's only my opinion, I did not think Rings of Power was terrible. It was a disappointment to me. It didn't nearly live up to the hype that I had for it. It was not a great show. I didn't think it was terrible. Like, I hated the first episode. And there were a couple of episodes I really didn't like. There were a couple of episodes I really did like. Overall, it was a disappointment to me. But I do not think it was terrible by any stretch of the imagination. I thought Elrond was kind of the MVP. Elrond and the dwarf were the MVPs of the series for me. Like, whenever Elrond and the dwarf were together in the show, that's when the show was firing on all cylinders for me. Like, that's when the show was at its absolute peak, was when those guys were on screen together. But it delved a little bit too much into the, here's foreshadowing of the movies, The Lord of the Rings. Like, it just leaned on that a little bit too much. And a number of other problems as well. Part of it being the most expensive series of all time was simply how much they had to pay for the rights to make the show, right? Like, when you hear about it being $1 billion to make that season, that wasn't $1 billion in production costs. Like, a lot of that money and expense was just securing the rights to make the show. That was a huge price tag. Now, on to the actual more important part of your stuff. Can it turn it around? Absolutely. Absolutely, you can turn it around. Like, how many great TV shows didn't have great first seasons? Some of my favorite TV shows of all times did not have great first seasons. Seinfeld was not the greatest first season. Parks and Rec, one of my all-time favorite shows, Parks and Rec, not a good first season. Or say, take Star Trek. Star Trek the Motion Picture, not good. Star Trek Wrath of Khan, one of the greatest sci-fi films of all time, right? So can they turn it around? Absolutely. 100%. We've seen many examples of this over the years, that a movie or a TV franchise can start off on the wrong foot, but then they find themselves. Parks and Rec is a great example of this. Parks and Rec, if you have watched Parks and Rec and love it the way I do, go back and watch season 1 again. It does not feel like the same show, because a lot of times a show has got to kind of find itself. Not always, but sometimes a show kind of has to find its voice and find its identity, figure out really what it is, and then it can start firing on all cylinders. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But yes. Now, will they turn it around for season 2? I have no idea. I certainly hope they do. But, they can do it, but will they do it? Not so sure. All right. Next up, we got Anonymous. I think one of the most underrated reasons for MCU's success was the relatability. The Iron Man and Captain America trilogies managed to keep the Infinity Saga grounded. The new MCU is missing this. Probably meant missing this. They are not letting you relate or invest in any character. I don't know that that's true. I don't know a lot of people who can relate with being a billionaire industrialist who owns weapons manufacturing and has an iron suit of whatever. I don't know that a lot of people find that relatable, or the things that he did. I think the idea of facing adversity in life, that's a relatable issue. I think the idea of coming to a crisis of belief, that is a relatable issue. These are things that the MCU movies can have. But I also think there's the things that the new MCU movies have as well. For example, let's look at Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, right? I think we can all relate with facing a crossroads or a choice in life where I can have something that I want, but me getting what I want could cause a lot of damage and hurt a lot of people. I think all of us at some point in our lives have faced dilemmas like that. And I think one of the most relatable aspects of a wild movie like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness was that whole idea that, Stephen faced when it came to Rachel McAdams. That the whole idea, and they touched on this in What If as well, like the thing he loves most in life, but pursuing or trying to have that one thing you love most in your life could cause untold consequences for yourself, for the person you love, for other people around you. So the thing about the MCU, DC, Star Wars, whatever, any kind of fantastical kind of story property is to make sure the characters will very rarely be relatable. We can't relate with Luke Skywalker. We can't relate with Steve Rogers, but we can relate with experiences that those characters themselves find themselves in. And I think they haven't done a bad job at that recently. They've just done a bad job executing good stories. I mean, that's been their problem. They've done some really good ones, but they've also had some ones that have been a little bit shaky. So I don't know, but I think you're absolutely bang on the money when you say that's a really important thing that these stories need to be able to do. And I hope they continue to do that. All right. Next up, Mike R. writes, hey, John, it's your accountant friend here coming to you from the end of another long tax season. Thanks for providing daily content and helping me get through my day-to-day work. Well, thanks so much for that, Mike. And listen, I know my accountant, it's funny. When I started working with my accountant 5 years ago, he was a pretty small shop. Like I think he had him and an assistant. I think that was it. He was a pretty small shop. I gotta be careful when I hit my table because my camera is attached to my table. And whenever I hit my table, my camera shakes. But he has grown over the years. And I've referred some of my friends to my accountant as well. He's great. He's fantastic. And then I was super excited. My accountant is the one whose wife was one of the stars of Killers of the Flower Moon. His wife was one of the main stars in that movie. And yeah, and so I like when I have talked to him on the phone, especially once we get into March and April, tax season, you could just hear his deteriorating quality of life voice of how hectic things must be. So for you guys who are accountants, yeah, I can't even imagine how much stress you guys go through this time of year. All right. Next up, we've got The Watcher, who writes, that episode 6 teaser for X-Men 97 you saw, if it's the IGN one titled War, then it doesn't feature new footage of Gambit. It's all flashback. FYI, the episode has a 9.8 rating after over 4,000 votes on IMDb. No episode of Invincible or of Arcane is that high. Okay, first of all, never pay attention to IMDb voting because they have no filtration system. Like anybody can go and vote whether or not they've seen the thing you're talking about. And that kind of makes any voting system on IMDb completely irrelevant. Like if there's no safeguard in place to ensure that somebody who's voting actually saw the thing they're talking about, then it's kind of pointless. It means nothing. About the Gambit thing. Yeah, I mentioned that I had seen a preview for a future episode prior to seeing. Which episode was it where Gambit bites it? It's like episode 4. Is it episode 4 or 5? I can't remember. Whichever. The episode that Gambit is fighting the Sentinel and all that kind of stuff. So it was, guys are in the Michael Gonzalez and CB and M. Joseph and John A.M. are saying episode 5. So I had actually seen the preview for the next episode before seeing episode 5. And I kind of mentioned that since Gambit is in that preview, it kind of took away a little bit of my experience watching episode 5 because now in my head, I already know that Gambit is coming back. I don't know if Gambit's coming back or not. And maybe the thing I saw was something, I don't think it was the IGN thing. Maybe the thing I saw was a flashback. That's kind of irrelevant. I just said that because I had seen that thing, because I was like 1 or 2 days late watching episode 5, like everybody else had already seen it. So the previews for the next episode were coming out. I said, oh, because I'd already seen the preview for the next episode and I saw Gambit in it, that kind of took away my experience from watching that episode. So yeah, that was just my experience with it. Whether it works out that way or not, I'm not sure, but it did affect my experience one way or the other, whether it should have or shouldn't have. All right. Your Name writes, years ago, my niece's drama club did the greatest Christmas pageant ever. Although not into faith-based movies, I may actually see it. Yeah, listen, I've never heard of the greatest Christmas pageant ever until they showed us a preview for it at CinemaCon. Does not look good to me, but whatever. But apparently it's something that's been a very popular thing, like story and book and whatever in the United States. I'd never heard of it in Canada, but that's just me. And yeah, I mean, I hope it's cute. I hope it's good. I didn't think the trailer was any good. I certainly didn't laugh at the trailer. But hopefully it'll be charming and great because Christmas is my number one favorite time of year. And Christmas Day is my absolute favorite day of the year. So anytime somebody's putting together a Christmas themed movie, I will always be cheering for it and hope that it's good. It's just that it's didn't look very good to me, but I hope it ends up being good. All right. Your Name also writes, you mentioned a food movie is good when you want to go to a good restaurant. Has there been a destination movie where you wanted to travel there when it was done? Yeah. So what Your Name is talking about is in a recent video not too long ago, I said, a food movie, like whether it's Jon Favreau's Chef or Ratatouille or something else like that. When you watch a food movie, and the first thing you want to do when the movie's over is you are just dying to go to someplace really good to eat. I said, that's when you know that the food movie's really good. You know what? The only time, I've seen movies that take place in Italy and I've seen movies that take place, so it's happened a lot. Yes. But the one for me that really, really got me is, Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Forgetting Sarah Marshall is the one that really got me. Because, this may surprise you, I've never been to Hawaii. I've never really felt the urge to go to Hawaii. Not that I have anything against Hawaii, not at all. But I've never felt like this super urge, like I need to go to Hawaii or anything like that. But watching Forgetting Sarah Marshall totally changed that for me. Like after watching Forgetting Sarah Marshall, by the way, Mr. J74, very few lines in any movie has ever made my wife laugh as hard as I got a surprise for you. There's very few things in movies that have ever made my wife laugh as hard as that scene in Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Anyway, yeah, Forgetting Sarah Marshall, when that thing was done, I really started thinking about maybe I need to go visit Hawaii. And every time I watch Forgetting Sarah Marshall now, I think about maybe I got to visit Hawaii. So that's one that definitely is up there. That's a great question, Your Name. Thanks for sending that in. All right, next up. Jonathan May writes, is Netflix's top 10 most watched list completely made up just to promote whatever films they want to push to the forefront? There have been times in the past that I question the authenticity of it. As far as I know, it's completely legit because that in and of itself is a form to promote. Listen, Netflix wants to promote whatever is actually performing, right? It's different than streaming is different than cable. There are different metrics of success. So whereas in the old cable days, the old TV network days, maybe if a show was struggling a little bit, but they were desperate to have that show work, they would give that one more promotion because maybe contracts that they have and they've already got so much money tied up in it and they got to make it a success. In the old world of cable and network television, that could be a case. But in streaming, it's actually different. Netflix doesn't care what you watch. They only care that you're watching. Let me say that again. Netflix does not care what you watch. They only care that you're watching. That's it. So with that understanding of being their paradigm, it is in their best interest, and what they are motivated to do is to promote what is already working. If they see a bunch of people are watching, I don't know, Best Pop-Tart Chef Season 5, I'm obviously just making that up, but if they see that Best Pop-Tart Chef Season 5, people are watching it, then they want to promote it. Because they don't care what you watch. They only care that you watch. If they see that, like Netflix had zero motivation or reason to want Suits to be successful. There was no motivation for them for Suits to be successful, but everybody started watching Suits and it got on the top 10 list. So yeah, Netflix, they just put on the top 10 thing. What is the top 10 thing? Because they want to promote the things that are already working and already going. So, yeah, that's two. Bright just mentioned somebody at Netflix is about to greenlight a Pop-Tart Chef show. Thanks, John. It's true. They probably are. All right. Next up. We got Jonathan May writes in again, says, with success of Iron Claw, it's got me thinking about that Chris Hemsworth Netflix Hogan biopic. Have you heard any movement on that film? Is it still happening? To the best. So for those of you who didn't know, a number of years ago, Chris Hemsworth signed up to star in a Hulk Hogan biopic. He was going to play a Hulk Hogan. As far as I can remember, I believe that project has been scrapped. I might be wrong about that. But I think that project was scrapped. And I don't know how successful Iron Claw was. As a matter of fact, give me a second here. I'm gonna look this up. Iron Claw box office. I'm not quite sure how much it made, to be honest with you. If I go to Box Office Mojo, it is telling me that Iron Claw made $44 million. Now, I'm sure it wasn't a super expensive movie to make, but basically, here's the thing. Having made $44 million, that basically means nobody watched it. I really liked Iron Claw, by the way. You know, just for me personally, I really thought Iron Claw was really good. I thought it was a really good movie, but nobody saw it. I mean, it made $44 million. Nobody saw it. But yeah, again, I think again, I can't say this with certainty because I might be wrong, but I think the Chris Hemsworth Hulk Hogan biopic is done. I done as in they're not going to do it. I think it's been scrapped, but I might be wrong about that. All right. And by the way, a bunch of people are reminding me that there is a Pop-Tart movie coming. Oh yes, I know. I know there's a Pop-Tart movie coming. Ann and I, when we were in Vegas at CinemaCon, we stayed in Vegas an extra day to go see Jerry Seinfeld. And he talked at length about the Pop-Tart movie. The trailer came out for it a while ago. So I'm not talking about the Pop-Tart movie. I'm talking about Pop-Tart Chef Season 5. Get on it. All right. Let's see. Jonathan May writes, on a show a while back, I heard you mention that you liked Christian rock. No, but there is some Christian rock I really like. Were you a fan of DC Talk? Absolutely. In my opinion, they were revolutionary ahead of their time. I don't know if DC Talk was revolutionary. DC Talk, though, had some really great stuff. Colored People was a beautiful song. I absolutely love that piece. I mean, yeah, they had a lot of stuff. I actually got to meet a couple of the guys from DC Talk on a couple of occasions. And yeah, they were really good. Again, I don't know that I would call them revolutionary or anything, but they were really, really quite good. I like DC Talk, and they would turn out there. My favorite of that era, though, and a lot of you guys wouldn't know the name of them, but one of my favorite bands of that era, though, was the Newsboys. I loved Newsboys. I thought they were really good. I actually got to hang out with them a couple of times because a buddy of mine was their lighting designer. A buddy of mine went on tour with them, and he was the guy who designed the lighting for their concerts and everything. And that's when I got to meet them. It's Yeah, it's great. Now, by the way, a lot of people who don't know DC Talk, I can already see in live chat saying they have a song called Colored People. The basic premise of the song is that all of us, the basic premise of the song is that we're all colored people, that our skin is God's canvas. And he paints us in a wide, beautiful piece of artistry. And so the song is talking about we're colored people and we live in this tainted place. We're colored people and they call us the human race. We've got a history so full of mistakes. Anyway, that's the nature. It's actually really, really a beautiful song. I know just the title can throw you off. I understand that the title can throw you off, but it's a beautiful, beautiful song. It's really, really good. All right. Let's see. Next up, we've got, that was Jonathan May. Next up, we got Jonathan May again. Didn't Mortal Kombat 2 recently wrap filming? I didn't love the first one as much as the 95 one-liner Goldmine. It also strayed a bit from the source material, but over-the-top violence was finally done right on film. When can we expect a trailer for Mortal Kombat 2? I don't know. I am also one of the people that didn't really like Mortal Kombat 1 very much. Now, again, not the 95 version, the more recent one. Although, I mean, come on. Sub-Zero slices, I believe it was Scorpion who he slices. And as the blood splatters from Scorpion, Sub-Zero freezes the blood into a spike, catches the blood spike, and then stabs him again with his own blood. I mean, come on. Yeah, the movie wasn't very good, but one cannot deny it had its moments. And listen, if they can build on the things that worked in that first movie and try to correct some of the stupid stuff they did in that movie, Mortal Kombat 2 could end up being pretty good. So, and hey, if Sonata is in it again, then, you know, you're going to have me there. I'll look for it for sure. All right. Next up, Jonathan May again writes, hear me out. Thor 5 directed by Zack Snyder. No. Just no. No. Listen, I'm a fan of Zack Snyder. Up until, you know, we've talked about this before, up until the Rebel Moon movies, and I haven't seen number 2 yet. There's only ever been one Zack Snyder movie that I didn't like, and that was Sucker Punch, a movie that even Zack Snyder doesn't like. That's the only movie of his I ever didn't like. I even really had a good time with Army of the Dead. I thought that was pretty fun. I didn't think it was awesome, but I thought it was pretty fun. I had a good time with it. I like every single Zack Snyder movie except for that. But no, I do not think Zack Snyder is a good fit for Thor 5 whatsoever. All right, next up. Again, Jonathan writes, we both have Filipino wives. We both adore Henry and Man of Steel. We both have YouTube channels that discuss comic book cinema. You might have a few more subs than me. Did we just become best friends? It's almost like a... what is it? A Step Brothers reference. Yeah, it's really weird. I mean, I love my married side of my family. I am married into a Filipino family. I am Italian, but Italian Canadian, but I married into a Filipino family, and there's a lot of similarities, actually, I gotta say, between Italian family and Filipino family. There's a lot of similarities. And the longer I'm married to Anne and the more I'm around and exposed to her family and the extended family, we've got a couple of nieces that I just adore so much. But I'm recognize more and more of the similarities between the different types. All right, next up. We've got another one from Jonathan May writes, seriously though, I've watched your show every day since the AMC days. You're a huge inspiration. The reason I discuss comic book cinema on YouTube, that might even be the name of my channel. Listen, I have always encouraged, and I love hearing that because I have always encouraged, I've talked about this multiple times over the years. I think every hardcore movie fan should have a blog, a podcast, or a YouTube channel. I think every hardcore movie fan, whether you have one reader or listener or viewer a month or 1,000 readers or listeners or viewers a month, I think because it makes us more engaged with the object of our fandom, but I also think it's good to add more voices to the conversation. And that's why I think everybody should do that. I really do. So I'm glad you're doing that, Jonathan. All right. Next up, we've got Ethan Holgate writes, one of two. Hey, John, I've been very confused about this and wondering if you know why. The last 3 of Guy Ritchie's movies have only been released on streaming in the UK and Ireland, and now the same is happening to Ungentlemanly Warfare. Why do you think that is? I'll tell you what, I didn't know because he did Operation Fortune, right? Which I really liked, but it didn't get an international release, if I understand right. And then he had the Jake Gyllenhaal movie. What was the one where what was the name of the movie, guys? Where Jake Gyllenhaal is the soldier in Iraq and he goes back to rescue his interpreter. I'm forgetting the name of the movie. Covenant. Thank you, Hayden. Hayden was the first one to put it in. The Covenant. We brought it up. We talked about on the John Campea Show today about the fact that the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare has not gotten an international release. It's only released in North America. And I honestly do not know why. I don't know why. I don't know if there's a reason for that. I don't know if they're just rolling it out in North America first to build word of mouth and then release it internationally, or if it's just a distribution issue and they weren't able, or maybe they didn't think it would play well in other countries. I just don't know. It's a great question. Maybe I should try to get somebody from the studio. Maybe I should try to get Guy Ritchie. I mean, I'm a fucking nobody, but I mean, I can still find an email address. Maybe I should reach out to Guy Ritchie's publicist. Reach out to Guy Ritchie's management and just see if I can ask Guy Ritchie a question for my dozens and dozens of viewers. You know, a lot of people, why is this movie not playing internationally? Why is it not playing in other countries? Maybe I should see if I can do that. And maybe he'll be able to have an answer for me. Maybe he won't, but it's a great question, Ethan. Anyway, Ethan goes on to ask, they've got cinema releases in America. Wrath of Man came out during COVID. I forgot about that one. So I understand at the time a streaming release. Was just curious to get your thoughts on this. If you know anything about it. I don't, but I should probably look into it about why that's happening. All right. Good question, Ethan. I'll see what I can find out. Ethan also writes, hey, John, I have to say I'm really excited for the Naked Gun reboot. Me too. I remember watching the Seth MacFarlane audio commentary for Ted 2, and when Liam Neeson's scene comes up, he mentioned that he thinks his comedic chops are perfect for a Naked Gun reboot. I will tell you what. Seth MacFarlane's movie, A Million Ways to Die in the West, is actually not that great, but it's got some killer moments. And Liam Neeson is absolutely one of the things that really worked about the movie. Now, I'm like everybody else. When I think of Liam Neeson, I don't think of comedy. But we talked about this on the show before. But Ricky Gervais had a show with Warwick Davis, and I think where they play themselves, and they've got a meeting. I can't remember the name of the show, but they have a meeting with Liam Neeson playing himself, Liam Neeson. And, oh, that's right. Sean Quinn. The name of the show was Life's Too Short. That was the name of the show. So Liam Neeson comes in, and it's Ricky Gervais, his comedy partner, and Warwick Davis. And Liam Neeson comes in, and he's talking like he normally talks to us. I want to try comedy. I'm very funny. He says, I'm very funny. I want to try comedy. And it's like, okay, you want to try comedy? And let's role play something out. All right. I walk into a store. Okay, you walk in the store. Hello, sir. How can I help you? I don't think you can. I have AIDS. And then Ricky Gervais is like, okay, well, you know, AIDS isn't really funny. And they keep going over it, and it's Ricky, and it's Liam Neeson just keeps coming back to it. I have AIDS. Stuff like that. And it is, go look it up on YouTube. It is one of the funniest things you will see this week. Absolutely one of the funniest things you'll see this week. So go check it out. When they made it official that Liam Neeson is starring in the new Naked Gun, I am all for it. I'm 100% for it. I think he's going to be great in it. All right. Let's see. Next up, we've got Tack, who writes, the Russo brothers said they got hired to do Winter Soldier because Feige watched Community and saw how well they could handle ensemble casts and stylistic action. Season 2 Community finale. I had heard of them before Winter Soldier personally. Yeah, okay, maybe you heard of them, but they were not household names. You go to even 90% of movie fans, if you had asked, have you heard of the Russo brothers? You'd say, are they a tag team in the WWE or something? 90% of people had never heard of the Russo brothers. Now, I think the reason Tack is bringing this up is because on one of our shows recently, one of the people writing in said, I think one of the things Marvel's got to do is stop hiring no-name directors. You can't do good if you have a no-name director. And I brought up, well, who ever heard? Nobody ever heard of the Russo brothers. Like average fans never heard of the Russo brothers. They had done Community and they did this crappy little movie called You, Me, and Dupree. You, Me, and Dupree has some things going for it. It does. Terrific cast, by the way, but it's really not a very good movie. And it's like, they came in and they did Winter Soldier, and then they did Civil War, and then they did Infinity War, right? Like it was, these were no-name people that nobody had heard of. I think a lot of average movie fans had not heard of Peyton Reed. Now listen, take out Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which was not any good, granted, but the first Ant-Man is great. I don't care what anybody says. First Ant-Man is great. So the problem is not getting no-name directors. That's not the problem at all. I think they've just had a problem having to work with a lot of, because they've made so much more projects than they normally would. They're working with directors maybe they normally would not have worked with. But again, the problem is far more systemic than that. It wasn't just the directors. It was the writing, the production mandates, all that kind of stuff has led to a lot of problems. But at any rate, while I'm glad, Tack, you had heard of the Russo brothers before them, the reality is 90% of people hadn't heard of Joe and Anthony. And they are fabulous. I love them. But yeah, they were no name, and look where they are now. All right. Next up, an anonymous viewer writes, I feel like some, if not most, of the criticism of Transformers 1 stems from the older crowd never seeing anything beyond G1. Since then, there have been many iterations with different tones, whether in form of animated series, comic books, and video games. Listen, I'm going to say this too. As somebody who grew up watching, nay, worshiping Transformers G1, I grew up, Optimus Prime was my religious figure. I've told the story before. This was me. I would get my allowance from mom and dad. I would go to Toys R Us, take whatever money I could, and buy whatever Transformers I could afford. Then I would take that Transformer home, take the toy out of the box, and then I would cut up the box. I would cut out the character picture on the front, and then I would cut out the description of the character in the back and cut out the power level bar. For those of you old enough, do you guys remember that on the Transformers box? That they had the power meter on the back. It was like a chart where it said firepower is a 5, speed is a 6, intelligence is an 8, leadership, a 2, blah, blah, and it had all their power charts, right? The Optimus was obviously like right across, like 10s across the board. But so I would go home, take the toy out, cut out the drawing, the character picture on the front, then I would, and cut out the description of power bar, then I would tape them on my wall in my bedroom. So I would have like Sideswipe, the description box, and the power level. Then right beside Sideswipe, I have like Sunstreaker and Prowl and Brawn and, Wheeljack and Ratchet. I'd have all of them on my wall, and my bedroom wall was covered in Transformers. Granted, at that age, not a lot of ladies coming to Johnny's bedroom. Even in the years following that, not a lot of ladies coming to Johnny's bedroom. But the point is, brothers and sisters of film fandom, I was a massive, massive G1 acolyte. Here's the thing. When I've seen some people's reactions to the Transformers 1 trailer, which I think is quite good, and say, oh, it's silly and jokes and whatever, I really do want to pull them aside and ask them, you say you're a Transformers fan, but have you ever watched the G1 animation shows? Because I don't think you have. Well, it's silly. Did you ever watch the original Transformers show? You don't think Sparkplug was silly? You don't think they made really lame jokes and so I don't actually think, you either just don't remember because it's been so many years, or I don't know that you've ever actually watched G1 Transformers. Because it's a lot of silly. It's a lot of silly in that original show. A lot of other stuff too. I loved it. Practically helped shape my life. That and Star Wars. Star Wars and Transformers in that order. But now, if the people who just watched said, that didn't really work for me. Okay, I get it. That's fine. But this whole thing is, I'm a Transformers fan and I found that to try to be too silly. I'm like, then you've never seen G1 Transformers. You've simply never watched them. Because if you'd watched G1 Transformers, you wouldn't be saying that, because you know how silly that sounds. Anyway, that's just kind of me. I don't expect it to be for everybody, but I thought it looked quite good. I thought Transformers 1 really worked. I thought it looks now, whether the movie's good or not, I have no idea. We'll see. But I did like the 10 minutes of footage they showed us at CinemaCon, and I like the trailer. And I've not been big on the idea of them doing this movie, but I kind of liked what I saw. Anyway, but we'll see if the movie ends up any good or not. Might be garbage, might be great, who knows. All right. Next up, we've got Edward Wells writes, how long will Scorsese Sinatra biopic be? 4 hours? Yeah, man, I'll tell you what, I love Martin Scorsese. Obviously, he is a first ballot Hall of Famer director, one of the greats. But dude has got to learn how to make his movies a little bit shorter. He's just, I don't know how long it's going to be. It might even end up being a two-parter, Edwards. I'm looking forward to seeing it. Don't get me wrong. I can't wait. He's doing this with Jennifer Lawrence and Leonardo DiCaprio. Leonardo DiCaprio as Blue Eyes. I'm all in. I can't wait to see it. But I do hope Scorsese remembers how to make a movie that's a reasonable runtime. All right. Next up, Wesley Cunningham writes, one of two. How do you think reception and legacy would be different if the 98 Godzilla was just not Godzilla, without the spines and billow effect in the roar? To me, it feels like its own kaiju action horror film with some homages to the Toho monster, and a pretty good one at that. What do you think? And hope all went well with the move. The move went great, actually. We've been packing up at the studio for a couple of days, but the actual move was yesterday. We started at 8:30 in the morning yesterday, got everything moved in and everything set up, and we were done by 7 p.m. So the move went great. Couldn't be happier. Now, the 98 Godzilla, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the one with Hank Azaria in it, right? Like it's why am I forgetting the Matthew, come on, help me out, guys. Matthew, what's it? Broderick. Thank you. Warren Mitchum was the first one to write it in. Matthew Broderick. That one. Okay. So as long as we're talking about the right one, I think you are both right and not right. I think you're right in the sense that I think the movie is probably received a little better if it was just not called Godzilla. I think if that monster was Ngando, creature of the sea, if that was like, and that's not Godzilla, that's Gundando, creature of the sea. If that movie was just called something different and it wasn't Godzilla and it was just a giant monster movie, I think it's actually received a little bit better. I think you're right about that. That being said, to me, and I'm only speaking for myself, I'm always just speaking for myself, it wasn't a strong movie. Godzilla or not, it was not a strong movie. So would it have been received a little bit better? Maybe. But I don't know that it would have been received much better. By the way, Lady Hotep is saying, John, you've been forgetting names lately. No, I haven't. Listen, I've been getting this for 15 years that I've been doing podcasting and broadcasting. There will often be times that I'm doing a show, right? And I'll be like, you remember that movie he did back in the 80s? And like, I'm freezing on the name of what's the name of the movie? Or like, I'm freezing on the name of that guy in that thing, right? That'll happen a lot. That's not lately. I mean, that's been for the last 15 years. I've been podcasting and YouTubing and all that kind of stuff. But here's the reality. Here's the truth. There's a reason most people do not do live. All right. There's a reason most people don't do live. And when they do, they'll talk about one very, very small specific topic and not talk like very, very few people in the movie space. I'm not the only one. I'm just saying there's not a lot. Very few people in the movie space will do 3 hours of live streaming a day, where not only do I have like 4, 5, 6, 7 topics that I'm talking about, but then there's the 40, 50, or 60 other topics that get brought up by viewers sending in questions, right? And especially on days that I also do an open mic, where that's another 2 to 3 hours that I'm doing a show and live streaming and taking dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of topics, stuff like that. Most people do stuff on YouTube pre-recorded, right? They record. So if they freeze on something or if they make a mistake or whatever, they just edit and put it back in. I sit here when I'm trying to address anywhere from 0 to 100 topics a day, between topics I range on my show and then questions and comments we take from viewers and stuff like that. You've got all this stuff going through your head and you're changing topics every 2 minutes. Guess what? You're going to freeze on names sometimes and whatever. It's going to happen. It's not just, it reminds me a lot of, I remember Christian Harloff, for those of you who don't know who I'm talking about. Christian Harloff was doing like a movie trivia schmodown. And it would always frustrate him so much. And when he would get all these comments and people write in, man, all the people on Movie Trivia Schmodown suck. How can they get how can you get so many answers wrong? I know the answers to those. And Christian would always say this, and it's true, is that you think you know the answers, but get in a competition, get on stage with the cameras in front of you and people in front of you, and have the question, when you're put on the spot and have the question point at you, let's see how you do. And so I think it was at LA Comic-Con. Where we also had a Movie Trivia Schmodown panel. And as a part of the Movie Trivia Schmodown panel, they allowed audience members to get on stage and actually compete. And they got like 1 out of 10. 2 out of 10, 0 out of 10. Like, it's just because it's a different thing when you're actually on the spot and it's just thrown at you like this and you're whatever. I always have, and I always will sometimes freeze on, the guy who is in Godzilla, Matthew Broderick. It will always happen. It will always happen. 1 out of every 10 topics that will happen. If I cover 40 topics, there's going to be at least 4 times a show that I'm going to go, what was the name of that movie again? But that's just the nature of trying to do a live show. Of trying to do a long show. The point of the story is John's getting old. Well, that's true too. Both are true. Of trying to do live streaming, taking live questions from the audience, and all that kind of stuff. I will challenge a lot of people to see if you could do better. And I'm sure there are some who could. Point is, I think I do okay. For the number of times that I do remember the name of the 4 actors in that movie from 15 years ago or whatever, and I'm able to pull it off the top of my head, there are going to be times that I don't. And that will never change. They will never change. All right. Next up. Let's see here. We've got Henri Martens, who writes, I've seen a lot of films, but the mid-90s and early 2000s have been my blind spot. So this week I finally watched Schindler's List, Dances with Wolves, Shawshank, Apollo 13, Braveheart. These are some of the greatest movies of all time. Braveheart, Gladiator, and Tombstone. It was a great week of movie watching. Man, I'll tell you what. I always feel that this big sense of jealousy when I have somebody write into the show and tell me they just watched like one of the all-time great movies for the first time. And the reason I feel a pang of jealousy is because I will never again get to watch Braveheart for the first time. I will never again get to watch Gladiator for the first time. And whenever I have somebody and this happened a lot during the pandemic, well, like people saying, I'm taking the opportunity. I'm watching Godfather. I'm like, oh my God, all these people who get to watch Godfather for the first time. Or people write, I've never seen Lord of the Rings. I'm watching Lord of the Rings now because we were all stuck at home. And just feel this amazing sense of jealousy that you got to have that experience and I'll never get to have that experience again. Not with those movies. All right. And then our last tip question comes to us from Henri Martens, who writes, I avoided Gladiator for years because I expected it to be really drab and filled with cliche scenes of emperors eating grapes and drinking from goblets. That sounds to me like a good weekend. But it was actually the first thing Ridley Scott didn't want in the film when he signed on to direct. Listen, I still remember the first time I watched Gladiator. It was in this little movie theater in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. And I went in with a couple of buddies of mine. One was, his name was Dale Friesen. And another guy's name was David Zebart. And me and Dale and David Zebart, one of the funniest guys I've ever known in my life, actually. We walked in to watch Gladiator, and I'll never forget that first time watching it. And walking out of that theater and just being like, it is truly one of the greatest movies ever made. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's just so good. All right, guys, listen. It's now time for us to get over to your live questions, the ones you guys have been sending in watching live via the Super Chat. The Super Chats are turned off. I said, hey, are the Super Chats turned off? Yes, the Super Chats are turned off. They filled up. So we're going to get over and get to your live questions. But before we do, we're going to take a quick second here and thank a couple of sponsors of the John Campea YouTube channel, our friends at Liquid IV and the Wellness Company. Guys, we want to thank a sponsor of today's video, The Wellness Company. Okay, so you wake up with a scratchy throat, congestion, runny nose, and cough. You know your body. You know you're getting sick. So your choices are tough it out, get sick and take time off work, or hope the doctor can see you this month, or wait 2 hours at urgent care and sit in a room full of sick people, or open your medical emergency kit. Match your symptoms to the doctor-recommended prescription. Start on the right meds and nip this in the bud now. Your medical emergency kit is not a first aid kit. It comes with doctor-prescribed meds to treat over 39 medical issues. Strong antibiotics for infections of all types, strep throat, pneumonia, UTIs, bronchitis, and so much more. Plus, a doctor's easy guide so you'll know exactly what to take and when. There's no waiting to see the doctor, no waiting at the pharmacy. It's all in here. Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit. Order yours online in just minutes. Your kit will be rushed right to your door, and you can get 15% off at twc.health/Campea and use promo code Campea when you check out. That's promo code Campea at twc.health/Campea. Guys, we want to take a second to thank a sponsor of today's video, Liquid IV. You know, summer is just around the corner, and Anna and I have some of our favorite activities coming up, from hiking, swimming, going camping. But in order to do all that, you gotta stay hydrated, because you need hydration that keeps up with every moment. Just a single stick of Liquid IV makes ordinary hydration extraordinary. And for me, preparing a glass is the easiest thing in the world. Simply open up a packet, pour it into your glass of water, and enjoy. And guys, there's a reason that Liquid IV is the #1 powdered hydration brand in America. It has 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink. Just tear, pour, and live more. Just 1 stick plus 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. With 8 vitamins and nutrients, non-GMO and free from gluten, dairy, and soy. There's no artificial colors or sweeteners, and it's got 4 delicious sugar-free flavors: white peach, green grape, raspberry melon, and lemon lime. So turn your ordinary water into extraordinary hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use the code Campea at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code Campea at liquidiv.com. And thank you to our friends at the Wellness Company and Liquid IV for sponsoring the John Campea Show. All right, guys, with that down, let's get over to your life. But before we do for a second, I want to touch on this for a second, because something that's always bothered me. I don't know if I've ever addressed it. Remember, because there's somebody in the live chat with the username Batman is not a fascist, which is great, a great name. But I remember. Do you guys remember this? When Blue Beetle was coming up. By the way, Blue Beetle was really fun. I had my doubts about Blue Beetle, but it was really fun. I enjoyed that movie. Anyway, when the trailer for Blue Beetle was coming out, there's that scene where Blue Beetle's uncle is in the trailer, says, "Batman's a fascist," right? And oh my God. The little Princess Snowflakes got so upset at that. "Oh, this is such, how can he be saying Batman's a fascist?" And they cry and cry and cry. And here's the thing. And I tried to say this to some people. Do you know who created the idea that there are people living in the DCEU who thinks Batman's a fascist? Do you know who came up with that idea? Zack Snyder. Because it was normally Snyder bros that were going, how dare that one character in the trailer say Batman's a fascist? That's outrageous. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, you do know that it was Zack Snyder who came up with that, right? Because Superman, in Batman versus Superman thought Batman was a fascist. Like, you do remember that, right? Like, you remember that the perception of Batman in that DC world at that time, some people viewed him kind of as a fascist. Superman thought Batman was a fascist. Superman thought Batman was a problem. So my question for a lot of these people would be, if Superman thought that, why can't other people living in the DCEU think that as well? Like, why is it okay that Superman thought that, but it's completely unreasonable to believe that other denizens, average citizens living in the DCEU wouldn't also have that opinion? Like, think for a second. Think about it for a second. And like, I watch all these guys cry. I'm not going to watch this movie. There's a guy and it says Batman's a fascist. Superman said it too. Well, he didn't say the words, but clearly Superman thought Batman was a bit of a fascist and thought he had to stop Batman. Right? So if Superman thought that, why wouldn't other people living in the DCU think that too? I just always thought that was hilarious. The selective outrage that people have. But anyway, whatever. Anyway, let's get over to some stuff here, shall we? We're going to start taking the live questions you guys have been sending in. And we're going to start off with Luke1234, who writes, was Anne upset about losing the home theater for the home studio? When Ann and I first started talking about the idea of maybe me bringing the the studio back to the house, I think she was definitely not thrilled, right? She was not thrilled with the idea because we loved our home theater setup. And, we made the home theater setup in what was our studio. But we both know, Ann and I both know, I'm not going to be doing this for a lot longer. Like sometime in the next year to 2 years. So it's still a ways off. It's still a ways off. But she thought, it's not going to be permanent. So that's okay. And we set up another room in the house where we took that huge, glorious viewing couch that we had. We put another room in the house and we created a gaming room instead of a theater room. We created a gaming room in another room in the house. And so she's perfectly happy with that. So yeah, in a couple of years, we'll turn the room back into a studio. We'll do that again sometime. And then, yeah, so I think I'll retire sometime around when Superman comes out. It was called Superman Legacy. So whether it's like, I'll definitely not retire until after that movie comes out, but whether it's like 2 months after that movie comes out or whether it'll be at the end of the year, like that year, it's 2025. So maybe sometime in 2025, we'll see. We will see. All right. Next up, we've got Dwayne Fernandez, who writes, "Hey, John, so we know there's probably going to be a ton of cameos in this movie, but do you think, I'm assuming you're talking about Deadpool, but do you think we'll have another actual X-Men supporting character besides Deadpool and besides just Deadpool and Wolverine? If so, any guesses?" Well, I think there's already a couple that we know for sure are coming. I believe it's an absolute certainty that Halle Berry is coming back as Storm. Because remember, when they were shooting Deadpool and Wolverine, Halle Berry put up some social media posts with a hairstyle that was very definitively Storm hair. Like, that wasn't a coincidence. So I think we're absolutely going to see that. Patrick Stewart has already pretty much let people know that he's going to be appearing in it. He's also kind of implied that, not Michael Fassbender, but Gandalf. Anyway, that we'll see Magneto back in there as well. Ian McKellen. So he's also implied that Ian McKellen will be there. I think there's been hints that Marsden may appear in there, Cyclops. So yeah, the answer to that is yes, 100% we're going to see other X-Men characters from the Fox era show up there as well. All right, next up. Ian McAllister writes, "Hey, John, after seeing the Spiderwick show, I was so disappointed and I thought maybe I should give it a shot. So I'm looking into what it takes to make a short fan film. Any tips?" No tips except just do it. The hardest part I find, the part where most people get stuck in any creative process, whether it's writing a book, whether it's making a short film or something like that, the biggest obstacle that people get stuck at is normally just getting started. The great film instructor, Dove S.S. Simmons, who I went and took because Quentin Tarantino recommended his film class. So I went and took his film class. And it's funny, I've told this before, but when I went and took the Dove S.S. Simmons film program, I actually ended up sitting beside and going to have lunch with the guy who played the dad in My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Remember the guy with the Windex? The guy who played her dad, Tupila's dad in Big Fat Greek Wedding? I actually ended up taking the class with him. He was super cool. He was awesome. Anyway, but Dove S.S. Simmons, he started the program, and you've heard me say this, but it's worth repeating every couple of months. And he said, "People always ask me, how do I make a movie?" He said, "This is how you make a movie. Pick up a camera, point it at some friends, say action, In about an hour and a half, hit stop, and there you've got a movie. But that's the point, that with creative processes, it's just the getting started stuff. Just getting started is so hard for people. So I would say just go do it. Just go make your fan film, man. Just get to it and go do it. Don't expect to make any money. Don't expect anybody to watch it. But that's not the important thing. The important thing is for you to undertake a creative process. Just get started. Go and do it. All right. Thanks for that, Ian. Next up, Ian also writes, a show that more people should talk about is Manhunt on Apple TV. Just amazing, about the hunt for John Wilkes Booth. I'll be honest with you, dude, I've never even heard of it. Now, normally, it's Netflix who have shows out that I've never even heard of before, but I didn't know about Manhunt on Apple TV. Apple TV makes great stuff, so I'm going to go check it out. Thanks for putting it on my radar, man. All right, next up, Raymond Vrada writes, thoughts on the high-speed rail between LA and Vegas. Love it. Love it. You know, Ann and I love going to Vegas. We go 5-6 times a year. Sometimes we'll fly. It's only like a 45-minute flight, but most of the time we drive because it's only about a 3.5-hour drive. But I'll tell you what, they've been talking about building this high-speed train that I think is going to go through Rancho Cucamonga, which is just a few minutes away from us. The idea of just jumping on a train and being in Vegas in like an hour and a half is such a great idea. I mean, they say they're building it. I think they're breaking ground this year. I absolutely love the idea, Raymond. All right, next up. John Redcorn writes, just realized the next 3 comic book films, Deadpool, Kraven, and Joker, are all rated R. I didn't even think about that. You're right. And focus on anti-heroes / villains from 3 different studios. Crazy. Well, I mean, let's not pretend that Deadpool isn't just a straight up hero. Deadpool, despite the fact that he has a foul mouth, he is completely a hero in the movies. I mean, he's been portrayed different ways in the comics, yes, but in the movies, he's not an anti-hero. He's a straight up hero. But yeah, Joker, Kraven, although I think they're probably going to portray Kraven as a hero, but we'll see. But yeah, I didn't even think about the next 3 major comic book films are all going to be R-rated. Didn't even think about that. Maybe everybody thinks that's the big gold thing right now. All right. Cookie Aucklet writes, hey, John, my wish is to see Deadpool be the new Stan Lee cameos after Deadpool and Wolverine. No, I've people have said that, have brought that up a lot since after Stan Lee tragically passed away and we lost Stan. There have been some people over the years that have said Deadpool should be now the one that makes it. No, it's not the same. It's not the same. Stan Lee was a real living, breathing force of nature in the industry who brought many, many, many of these characters to life in the first place. Deadpool's a fictional comedy character. I love Deadpool. You guys know I love Deadpool. Okay. This is not me trashing on Deadpool. I adore Deadpool, but it's not the same thing. That's not a cameo anymore. You don't replace Stan Lee. Stan Lee was a real person making these cameos because Stan Lee didn't make cameos because all these movies needed some cameo. He made the cameos because he's Stan Lee. And I mean, if any, Canadian Spring just brought up a really good point. Like, if you were going to try to have the new cameo for that, then the most logical choice would probably be Kevin Feige, the man behind this entire movie franchise. But even then, I don't think you do it. Like, just taking now some fictional character from one of the movies and making them the cameo, to me, that makes no sense. It's not the same thing. So no, I don't think they should do that. I think it was only cool and only special because it was Stan Lee. Anybody else, other than maybe a Kevin Feige, but anybody else, it doesn't make sense to do it. But that's just my take on it. All right, thanks for that, Cookie. Next up, Jared Oberfeld writes, I am not going to expect Deadpool and Wolverine to make $1 billion, but if it is good, I would not be surprised if it does. It still does not need to. Listen, I think you just said something that needs to be remembered in every single one of these conversations we have about, I think it's a very good, valid conversation to have about if Deadpool can join the $1 billion club. Because we're talking about what is interesting to the audience. What's going to drive people to want to go to the movie theater and go watch it? Will they go back? Will they bring more friends? All that kind of stuff. It's an important discussion. But I think you brought up a very, very important point. Deadpool does not need to make $1 billion. Right? If it makes 600 million, it's a huge win. Financially for them, that's a huge win. $600 million, mwah, fabulous. It does not need to make $1 billion. If it makes $800 million, smash hit, huge success, all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't need to make $1 billion. And us having these conversations about whether or not we think it can make $1 billion is not at all suggesting that that's the threshold it needs to hit in order to be considered a win. Not at all. The win line is way, way, way earlier. But can it be one of those few films in Hollywood history, when you consider the hundreds of thousands of movies that have been made, and yet only double digits have ever joined the $1 billion club? Can Deadpool be the next one to do that? And only the second R-rated film in history to join the $1 billion club. Can it do it? That is not at all suggesting that that's the ribbon line it's got to cross in order to be considered successful. Not at all. That line comes much before that. I'm glad you pointed that out. All right. Next up, Isaac Martinez writes, Challengers looks cool. I need to check that out. Yeah, listen, I think it looks really good. I'm not even a big tennis guy. I'm not even the world's biggest Zendaya fan, but that movie looks really, really interesting, and I'm totally down for seeing it too. All right, next up, Jamie Sundays writes, I don't know, man. I think it settles in the $800 to $900 million range. $1 billion is asking a lot for general viewers who have checked out of comic book movies in the recent years. Here's the thing, though. We say, I don't believe people have checked out of comic book movies. I think they've checked out of mediocre movies. So when we had a movie like Guardians of the Galaxy 3 come out, there were a lot, remember, don't forget, we talked about it on the show too before the movie came out. A lot of people were predicting that Guardians of the Galaxy 3 would make somewhere around the $400 to $500 million range. Remember that? That was the big thing. A bunch of people saying it's going to make $400 to $500 million. What did Guardians of the Galaxy 3 do? Made over $800 million. There is no comic book movie fatigue. There is mediocrity fatigue. There is mediocre fatigue. And unfortunately, there's just been a lot of mediocre stuff in recent years and the audiences are getting kind of tired of it. So yeah, I mean, the movie made over $800 million. Black Panther 2, without its star and without its main character, still made over $800 million at the box office. Wrap your head around that. Black Panther 2, without Black Panther, without its main star, the guy who was the main engine behind that movie, the heart and soul of it, and it still made over $800 million. To me, that is insane. I mean, so again, I don't think, listen, Deadpool very well could make $800 to $900 million, and that would be a huge success for them. But I still believe the $1 billion mark is at play. I don't believe $2 billion is at play. I don't believe 1.5 is at play, but I completely believe $1 billion is there. But we'll find out, Jamie. And who knows, maybe I'll change my mind after I see it if I don't think it's very good. All right. Jamie Sundays also writes, I say a good portion of general audience just feels very lukewarm on comic book movies now. Dude, only 2 comic book movies were profitable last year, none over $1 billion. Again, like we were just talking, don't use the billion as any kind of gauge. $1 billion is a truly exceptional number. And by exceptional, I mean it's the exception, right? Again, I attribute a lot of it to mediocrity, but Deadpool is a name people love. Deadpool is a brand people love. People loved the first 2 Deadpool movies. It has a track record with the audience. Unlike, say, I don't know, the Marvels, right? A lot of people don't have Disney Plus. They didn't even know who more than half the characters in the trailers were. There's not a track record of the Marvels. This is the first time they were even putting those characters together. Or Blue Beetle. There was no track record for Blue Beetle. And the DCU had been struggling a lot for a long time. Deadpool is a different scenario. It's a different situation. It has a rich, successful, and trusted track record with the audience. I don't think I honestly don't believe there's a lot of people who are going to go, like somebody who loved Deadpool 1 and Deadpool 2 aren't going to go, yeah, but I didn't love Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, so I don't know if I'm excited for Deadpool 3. I think they will absolutely be excited for Deadpool 3. And a lot of average moviegoers went to go see Deadpool 1 and Deadpool 2. I mean, it's not the Deadpool movies aren't like Godzilla -1, where like less than $200 million worth of people saw it. By the way, I love Godzilla -1. I mean, that's not me trashing on Godzilla -1. I love Godzilla -1. That movie made less than $200 million at the box office, right? You want to talk about average moviegoers? Both of those R-rated films made over $700 million each. People love them. I think the track record is going to bring the people out. I really, really do. Again, as long as the movie doesn't suck. So we'll see. Johnny Weiner writes, about to watch Spider-Man 2, both this and last week's Spider-Man 1 was my first time to see it in theaters. Nice. Love what Sony is doing, re-releasing all the Spider-Man films. Yeah, now listen, I didn't go back to the theaters to watch them again, but I think it's a great move, especially because of the strikes and all that kind of stuff. This year, we're suffering with some product shortage for the movie theaters. I think they said there's like going to be 40 less wide release films this year than last year. The movie theaters are desperately struggling with lack of product. So I think the idea for re-releasing some Star Wars movies, which is coming, and re-releasing the Spider-Man films is a really, really good idea. All right, next up, we've got Raymond Verrata who writes, everyone, please stop using need inappropriately. You want, not need. I see it everywhere. X, Reddit, YouTube. We need this to happen. We need Aaron. We need Sith Lord season 20. It's want, people. Yeah, I often have that thing. And I think he's referring to somebody in the live chat before the show started today wrote in, we need to have Aaron back. Please have Aaron back. It's like, Aaron is awesome. But Aaron lives in New York now. I don't think she's coming in to do the show. I could ask. I don't think she's going to do it. Anyway. By the way, in case for those of you who missed it, we talked about on the show, Aaron and Tom now have 2 kids. They had another kid recently. We couldn't be happier for them. So I always bring this up a lot. It's like somebody say, like there's a movie coming out and says, we don't need that movie. And I will always say, guys, listen, there has never once in the history of Hollywood been a movie that needed to be made. Oh, John, this movie. No. No movie in the history of Hollywood has ever needed to be made. There have been movies that have been a really good idea to make them. There have been movies that a lot of people have wanted. There has never been a movie. Well, we just don't need that movie. We don't need any movie. Guess what? If Oppenheimer never came out last year, my life would be exactly the same today as it was yesterday. Did not need to see Oppenheimer. Did not need that movie to be in theaters. The movie business would still be here. We'd still be talking about it. Now, was it a good idea? Damn right it was. Was it a great movie? Absolutely. Best Picture winner, all that kind of stuff. Part of the Barbenheimer phenom. Fabulous. But did we need it? No, we didn't. You're right. We absolutely misused. But then again, there's a lot of words we misuse sometimes, to be fair. But you're right. Need is definitely one of the words, Raymond. All right, next up. Christopher Brickner writes, last episode of Shogun is almost out. Sad, John? Yes. Yeah, the last final episode of Shogun comes out tonight. This is one of the best shows I've ever seen. In the last number of years, there have been 2 shows that I have been desperately excited about. One was Lord of the Rings of Power. And the second was Shogun. Rings of Power was a wah-wah. I mean, yeah, I didn't think Rings of Power was terrible, but it did not anywhere live up to the hype, my hype. It did not anywhere near live up to my expectations or my hopes. It wasn't terrible, but it was what it was. So that made me kind of nervous about the other show I've been desperately excited about, which is Shogun. But Shogun, I think it is one of the greatest shows of all time. I really do. I think it is one of the greatest shows of all time. It's if the final episode can stick the landing, all right, And who knows if it will or not. Maybe they'll drop the ball. But if the final episode can stick the landing, Shogun will replace Heroes Season 1 as my all-time favorite single season of television. Or at least all-time favorite first season of television ever. Heroes Season 1 with Milo Ventimiglia. Greatest first season, I think the greatest first season of a TV show ever. Not the greatest show overall of all time, but the first season was like the best first season of a TV show I've ever seen. Shogun will replace it for me if it sticks the landing with the episode that we're going to see tonight. And again, a lot of great shows fumble the finale. Seinfeld even fumbled the finale, right? I'm going to tell you what, if Lord Toranaga-sama can bring it home tonight, it becomes to me the greatest first season of a TV show of all time. And we'll see. We'll see if it's able to land it. All right, next up. We got Rafe from State Farm writes, when Shogun premiered, I messaged you that it has the potential to be my second most favorite series after Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. I was right, sensing its greatness. Listen, the potential of Shogun should never have been in doubt because I've read the James Clavell novel. I saw the 1980s miniseries. The potential of Shogun, which is why for years I've been screaming for somebody to remake Shogun. And then when they finally did announce it a few years ago, I nearly lost my mind with excitement because the potential was always there. But here's the thing about Hollywood, right? Potential is one thing. Realizing that potential is another thing. Realizing the potential, like actually executing, is another thing. The potential for Shogun was always there, but what makes it special is that they executed. They made it perfect. It's a perfect show. And I cannot wait. Although while I'm very, very excited to watch it, I'm also very sad, Rafe, because it's the final episode. All right, Aaron writes, your wife and Ray will love watching Taskmaster. I promise you, I recommend it to all your friends. The bad guy from Black Widow? My wife and Ray will love Taskmaster. Is this like a show? Guys in the live chat, help me out here. Is this a show? Oh, so R2B2CT1 is saying it's a British show. Okay. I'm not familiar with it. Maybe I will have to check it out myself. Oh, it's a reality show. Calvin Patel saying it's a reality. Okay. I'll have to check it out. It's a game show, people are saying. Okay, a reality game show. All right. Where does one watch this? This Taskmaster? I'm assuming it's a Netflix series, but maybe it's not. What is it, guys? Is this a Netflix show? Is this a Max show? Is it a Peacock? People are saying BBC. Oh, they're saying it's on Pluto TV. All right. I'll have to check it out. I will look for it. Taskmaster. Okay, next thing to add to my list. All right. Chubbs writes, new fear unlocked. Logan stabbing me in the balls. Yeah, dude. That, first of all, that has been one of the great, with all the great moments in the Deadpool trailer. One of the things people haven't talked a lot about is the action in it, particularly the fight sequences between Deadpool and Wolverine. Like that ching, 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 and then block, 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 and then the stab in the balls is, oh my God. That's so good. And by the way, too, like when Deadpool basically has rear mount on Wolverine and he sticks his guns in his kidneys and starts firing his guns into the side, it's like, oh, it's such a great shot. Yes, but the ball stabbing scene, very uncomfortable. All right, next up. Super Nintendo Chalmers writes, hey, John, what did you think of the movie Draft Day? That the one with Kevin Costner? A lot of the sports talk radio shows I listen to hate it. Thanks. Now, granted, by the way, this is the Kevin Costner movie, right? Draft Day. Help me out in the live chat. Let me know if I'm thinking of a different movie. But if we're talking about the one with Kevin Costner as the GM, Hayden is saying yes. It's that one. So's Patrick. Okay. It's been years since I've watched it. But I think I remember I thought it was a pretty decent little film. Like not in my top 10 greatest sports films of all time, but I remember liking it. I had a good time with Draft Day. Yeah. So yeah, I like it. All right. Next up. Kyle Ginder writes, I know Bob Chapek gets a lot of blame for lack of quality for Marvel, but doesn't Kevin Feige have to take some of the blame as well for the lack of direction and connectivity between projects? Okay, first of all, connectivity between projects, I don't give a shit. I really don't. I could care less about that whatsoever. Because I don't, like, a bad movie that super connects with another movie is still a bad movie. I don't really care about that. I know that's been more important to people, like Rob and some other people, and I get it. That's fine. But for me personally, I don't care. A good movie that's not connected is still a good movie. A bad movie that is connected is still a bad movie. So I don't really care about that. But to the basic thing of, look, Chapek carries a lot of the blame, but does some of it still rest with Kevin Feige? 100% it does. 100%. Like, I always say this, right? When people want to bring up the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 3, they say, well, that wasn't Sam Raimi's fault because the studio made him put in, Venom. I say, okay, yep. But Sam Raimi then should have just made a good movie with Venom. The number one thing I think that people who aren't involved in filmmaking say that I think, it's kind of crazy is, well, the studio interfered. Guess what? Studios interfere in every movie. The difference is when the movie turns out great, people call it collaboration. But when the exact same thing happens in another movie, but that movie turns out bad, then they call it studio interference. Same thing, but the movie turns out great, collaboration. Turns out bad, studio interference. Every movie, unless your name is Scorsese, Christopher Nolan, or Steven Spielberg, every movie has studio involvement. I'm not going to call it collaboration. I'm not going to call it interference. I'll call it involvement. Every movie does. Every movie that gets made has studio executives passing notes to the director. It always happens. It's a part of the game. And sometimes that can increase the director's chances of making a good movie. Sometimes maybe it decreases the chances of the director making a good movie. But at the end of the day, the director still has to take some of the responsibility. They do. And I don't think it's any different for Kevin Feige. I don't think Kevin Feige gets let off the hook completely for, let's say, the downswing that Marvel has had the last couple of years. Again, they've still made some great stuff. Great stuff. But they've also had a number of things that have stumbled more than we're used to seeing. A lot of that has to do with Bob Chapek taking away a lot of Kevin Feige's creative power. A lot of the mandates that we now know happened because the Marvel executives have come out and said publicly that under Bob Chapek, he created this new mandate that you have to make as much as possible, as fast as possible, so we can crank stuff out on Disney Plus. And that is going to have a negative impact. But that doesn't completely let Kevin Feige, who I adore Kevin Feige. I love Kevin. He's always been very, very nice to me. But that does not let Kevin Feige off the hook completely. So does he still need to shoulder some of the responsibility for the kind of downturn that Marvel's had in the last couple of years? 100%. 100%. But he's also been working against things that he did not have working against him in the first 12 years or 13 years of him doing Marvel. And now he has his authority back. Now he gets to decide which projects get made and which projects don't. Now he gets to decide where projects are going to go. Now he gets to decide which movies he's going to greenlight and which ones he does not. He has that power back. But it does not let him off the hook entirely for all the problems that Marvel has had the last couple of years. He absolutely needs to bear some of the responsibility. That's not taking anything away from the major problem was Bob Chapek. But he still has some problem. He still has some of the responsibility. 100% he does, and he's got to work hard to correct them and to get things back on the winning path. All right. Next up, Who do we got next? That was Kyle. Next up, Ray from State Farms writes, did you have the chance to see Abigail? I did not. Watched it on Friday and I loved it. The girl was incredible. It has lots of potential for this young actress. Listen, ever since the first trailer, I've been very excited for Abigail. Unfortunately, this week has been about packing, getting ready for the move, and then actually moving. And that's basically taken all my time. So I'm hoping in the next 48 hours, I get to see 2 movies that I'm very excited about. The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare and Abigail, because I want to see them both, but unfortunately I haven't seen either yet. I still haven't watched Rebel Moon Part 2. I got to do that tonight at some point. All right. Tyler Frost writes, mention of Kang in Deadpool and Wolverine. I think so, yes, because the TVA is clearly there. I think it would be weird if, understanding the role Kang has had in both the creation, evolution, and where the TVA ends off, it'd be almost weird if Kang isn't mentioned. So I believe that we will hear a Kang mention in Deadpool. I don't know that for a fact, but that's my guess. All right. Next up, Matthew Brown writes, call me crazy, John, but I think Henry Cavill should be the next Wolverine. I personally want Tom Hardy, but if he can't, Henry should. The physique is there and his acting just keeps getting better and better. Yeah, but there are a lot of people with great physiques and who are really good actors. So listen, you all know I have a borderline obsession with Henry Cavill. I love Henry Cavill. Everybody knows this. But he's one actor. And look, I love Henry Cavill, but he's not the greatest actor. Like, he's not the next Daniel Day-Lewis. He's a terrific actor. I love him a lot, but he's not Daniel Day-Lewis. He's not, he's not Denzel. And I think there are a lot of great movies for him to do, but I'm not seeing what makes him perfect for Wolverine. And by the way, it's the same problem. Hugh Jackman has been able to play Wolverine now for nearly 25 years, right? For nearly 25 years, he's been playing Wolverine. Do you start a brand new Wolverine with a guy in his 40s? I don't know that you do. I don't know that you do. Let me look up something here. Because I think Hugh Jackman is what, 55? Hugh Jackman age. I think he's 55. Yeah, he's 55. Which means when he started playing Wolverine, he was 29 or 30. Actually, when he first started shooting Wolverine, he would have been 29. When he was shooting the first X-Men movie, playing Wolverine, he was 29 years old. If you start a new Wolverine with Henry Cavill and say shooting that movie would probably be at best 2 years away, you're talking about starting a brand new Wolverine with a guy who's 42 years old. I don't know. Henry Cavill can be in a million movies. And if you needed him for just a 2-picture deal, absolutely make him Wolverine. But if you're hoping to have a new Wolverine who can be Wolverine like Hugh Jackman for 15 years or more, like be our Wolverine for a generation, as much as I love Henry, I don't think you can start that character. When the last one started at 29, I don't think you can start this one at 42. So yeah, I just don't know. I love Henry. I just don't see that he's the next Wolverine. I don't know if obviously I'd be thrilled if they announced he's going to be Wolverine, but if I was a studio executive, I don't know if that's the right decision. All right. Hayden Center writes, thanks for all you do, John. Loving the new studio. Thank you so much. We enjoy the studio. We like the studio a lot. It's actually, we used to do the show from this studio at home. And we've got it set up completely differently than we did last time. And it is a much better setup, a much more practical, much more effective, much more, let's just say handy. I know that sounds weird, but if you're trying to work in here, we just have a much more efficient layout in here and we really like it. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate that, man. All right. David Ruffalo writes, and this is our last question of the day. No, second last question of the day. David Ruffalo writes, Do you think Fallout's Lucy and Maximus have the Ray and film relationship we all wanted? No. I mean, I guess there are similarities. I mean, Maximus is a low-level guy in the Brotherhood. Finn was a low-ranking stormtrooper in the Empire. I guess my first thought was there's not enough similarities, but I guess now that I think about it in that way, understanding the circumstances that they both come out of. Now, the difference, of course, is that Rey comes from nothing. Like Rey has every day for Rey is a fight for survival her whole life. That is very different from Lucy. Lucy comes from a place of privilege. Lucy comes from almost kind of a paradise. Right? So it's very different that way. But if you look at from the Finn/Maximus side, I guess there are some similarities there. So no, I don't think it's the new Rey and Finn, but I guess there are more similarities there than I thought of at first. All right. Last question of the day. And today has already been over a 2-hour show. Comes us from David Cushmore, who writes, do you think Deadpool 3 going to do well in the box office? Oh, I mean, look. You have to be borderline dumb to not understand that Deadpool is going to make a lot of money. I think if you were to suggest that Deadpool isn't going to make money, that's a very stupid thing to say. The question becomes how much money it will make, right? How much money will it make? And that's really the only question is how much it's going to make money, but does it make 600 million making money, or does it make $1 billion making money? I don't know anybody with one shred of common sense that doesn't think it'll like cross 500 million. I mean, if Wonka makes over 600 million, Deadpool 3 is going to make that. So I don't know anybody with the slightest shred of common sense that doesn't believe Deadpool will at least make 500 million. The question becomes, how much over that will it make? And I don't know. My guess, I think every bit of evidence that we have, anecdotal as it may be, I personally think every ounce of evidence that we have points to this thing making $1 billion. Now, maybe it will, maybe it won't, right? But I think it'll get really, really close to that. All right, guys. And with that down, that'll do it for today's installment of Open Mic. Thank you so much for being here and joining me this afternoon in the first Open Mic from the new/old studio. Good to have you guys here. Big special thank you to all you guys who sent in questions, whether you sent it into the tip link or whether you were watching live and used the super chat feature. Number one, because you gave us fun things to talk about. But number two, by doing so, you actually supported us and what we do here and helping us make these shows. So thank you guys so very much for your support. Don't forget, the John Campea Show returns again tomorrow. Looking forward to seeing you then. That'll do it for me for now, guys. My name's John Campea. Big, warm love and affection to all of you. I'll talk to you next time. And until then, my friends, bye-bye.